I never imagined the person I loved, the man I thought was my partner in life, could betray me so completely. But here I am, facing the crushing reality that my own family sided with him, turning their backs on me during one of the most painful times of my life. I'm 33, and my divorce just finalized a couple of months ago, though it had been looming for nearly a year. I first met James, my ex-husband, when I was 25, introduced by mutual friends. We spent 2 wonderful years together, falling in love, and eventually, we decided to live together. James's family was traditional, conservative, even, and they didn't approve of us cohabiting without being married. So, we made the decision to get married. I loved him deeply, and I didn't see any reason why I shouldn't. My own parents supported it, and so we tied the knot. Our first year together felt like the dream we both hoped for, but then something unexpected happened. I found out I was pregnant. The news filled me with joy, and I truly believed that everything was falling into place. But soon, the pressure began. My in-laws, who had always been very opinionated, started pushing me to quit my job to focus on motherhood. The pressure wasn't just from them, it came from my own family as well. The job I loved was unkind to maternity leave, offering me only a short break, and everyone, including James, assured me that quitting would be the right move for the long run. James, who had always been confident and reassuring, promised that he would take care of everything. "Don't worry about the money," he said. "I've got us covered." My parents and older brother, both of whom had grown up with traditional values, agreed with this decision. My mom had stayed home when we were kids, and now it was my turn. So, I made the choice to stay at home, even though it wasn't an easy one. Things felt fine for a while after our son was born. I left my career behind, believing in James and our future. But soon, the cracks began to show. I started to notice a change in James's behavior. At first, I couldn't quite put my finger on it. He was distant, irritable, snapping at me whenever I tried to talk. He seemed happy enough when he played with our son, but anything else was an ordeal. He was always too tired or too busy to spend time with me. The more I tried to understand, the more I felt like I was losing him. I tried to make things work because, deep down, I still loved him. I believed in our marriage. But the more I tried, the more it felt like I was fighting a losing battle. 2 years passed, and nothing changed. He spent long hours at work, came home late, and when he was home, it was like he wasn't really there with me. I tried to talk to him about it, but his answer was always the same. He was stressed from being the sole provider. It hurt me deeply because I had sacrificed my career for him. I asked if he would prefer I go back to work, split the burden, but that idea was rejected instantly. Not only would it be an insult to his pride, but his family would never approve of it. So, I stayed at home. Our son was my only source of joy at that point. James had changed, he wasn't the man I had married, and I felt like I was losing him more every day. Then, about a year ago, everything I had suspected came crashing down. I discovered the truth. James had been having an affair with one of his coworkers. It hurt. It burned. But I had suspected it for months, and though I had searched through his things, through his phone, through his laptop, I couldn't find any proof. It was like he was hiding in plain sight. Then, the universe gave me what I needed, a moment of clarity, one that would forever change my life. It was my son's birthday. We threw a big party, and James invited his close friend, the woman he had been cheating on me with. She was a single mom, with a son around our son's age, so it didn't seem strange that she'd be there. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have anticipated, was what I would find when I went upstairs to change for the party. I opened the door to our bedroom, and there they were. James and his coworker, sitting together on our bed, full on making out. My heart sank. It took a moment for my brain to process what I was seeing. But when I realized it was true, I couldn't stop myself. My own bedroom, the one place that should have been sacred, was violated. They didn't even stop when they heard the door creak. They didn't care. I walked toward them, making my presence known, my emotions a storm inside me. I wasn't proud of what happened next, but I couldn't hold back. I grabbed her by the hair and dragged her out of the room. It was like something in me snapped. James, despite being stronger than me, couldn't stop me. I wasn't going to let this go, not this time. The room was a blur of chaos, a whirlwind of emotions and noise, but somehow I still felt numb, disconnected. The rage, it had overtaken me. I could barely recall the details of what had happened, but the aftermath would haunt me forever. In that moment, I dragged her, my own wife, down the stairs, as if the gravity of the situation didn't matter. James was right behind me, but nothing felt real. I didn't even care that my son was watching, standing there, his friends frozen in shock. The words spilled out of my mouth, harsh and unfiltered, words I didn't even recognize as my own, calling her names I would never dream of saying. I had lost control completely. But at the time, I didn't care. My family, the people who should have been the ones to support me, were there too, my parents, my brother, my in-laws. They were silent, watching, but offering no comfort. I could hear the accusations echo in the room as I screamed at the top of my lungs, exposing everything. Everything she and James had done in my own bed, for all to hear. It didn't matter that my son was there, or that his friends were listening, wide-eyed. None of it mattered. Looking back, I feel the weight of the embarrassment, the depth of my actions, but in that moment, all I could feel was rage, confusion, and betrayal. It wasn't until my father stepped in, calming me down with a force that felt both loving and terrifying, that I finally stumbled back to my room, retreating from the scene I had created. And once the door clicked shut behind me, the facade cracked. I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, my body trembling with each breath. I needed someone, anyone, to stay with me, to help me breathe through it. But no one came. No one stayed. Instead, my father locked me in my room, as if I was some kind of animal that needed to be contained. The anger in me simmered, mixing with the confusion. I had always known my parents cared more about appearances than they did about me. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. Not a soul came to check on me in the hours that passed. I sat in the silence, unsure of what was happening outside, isolated, my phone taken away, cut off from the world. What had I done? How had it all spiraled so quickly? Hours later, only after midnight, my brother opened the door, but it wasn't with concern. It was a formality, a cold exchange. He didn't ask how I was or if I needed anything. Instead, he simply told me that everyone had left. James, his parents, and even my son were gone. It was just me, my parents, and my brother now. And the conversation that followed wasn't what I expected. The discussion, according to my family, was about me. About how I had embarrassed them. How my behavior at the party, my breakdown, had shattered the image they had worked so hard to maintain. They told me I needed to apologize to everyone. To the guests. To James. To his parents. Apologize? For what? For exposing the truth? James, they told me, had been so upset, and it had been such a struggle to stop his coworker from pressing charges. Physical violence, they said. They acted like that was what I owed him. A simple apology. The nerve, the audacity. I lost it. I screamed. I told them all to get out. My own family. Under my roof, they expected me to beg for forgiveness from the man who had destroyed me. They said I owed it to him, to give him a second chance. And then, the ultimatum. If I didn't apologize, they would cut ties with me. Goodbye, I thought. I was done pretending, done caring what anyone thought. I was done with all of it. The very next day, I contacted a lawyer. I didn't need anyone's approval. Within a week, the divorce papers were in motion. James, my husband, the man I once trusted, was served. And he was shocked. As if he hadn't seen it coming. When he came home that day, demanding answers, I didn't hold back. The words that followed were harsh, brutal, as I tore into him for everything he'd done. His betrayal. The lies. The disrespect. And then, the promise, his words cut through me. He swore I would never see my son again. I didn't realize how serious he was. The battle had only begun. The divorce was the easy part, everything was straightforward. The house, my home, was mine. No contest. But the custody battle, that's where the real fight would take place. That's where the claws came out. My parents? My brother? They chose his side. For money. For status. I couldn't believe it. It was all about what they could gain. The love, the loyalty I thought I had from them? It was gone. And James? He was playing the part of the perfect father, calling me a danger to my son's well-being, accusing me of being an unfit mother, an alcoholic, a psychotic woman. He made up incidents, lies, fabrications, and they all jumped on board. It didn't matter that I had never harmed my son. They didn't care. The story had been written, and I was the villain. All my friends, they sided with him. The breakdown at my son's birthday party was the final nail in the coffin. The deepest cut, the one that felt like the cruelest betrayal, came when my parents and my brother decided to testify against me in court. They claimed I needed rehab, intensive therapy. Basically, they painted me as unstable, unfit to even be near my son. It was beyond heartbreaking. And to make matters worse, they blamed my mental state for James' infidelity. They said he cheated because he couldn't handle me anymore. It wasn't just a legal fight, it felt like an emotional war, with the people I trusted most working against me. I fought hard, I really did. My lawyer and I scoured every corner, trying to gather anything that could prove I was a good mother. But it was all in vain. Every shred of evidence crumbled under the weight of their lies. When the verdict came down a couple of months ago, I realized the unthinkable. I lost. That was the last time I saw my son in person. I was granted supervised visits, but James wouldn't let me see him anyway. It was just a piece of paper with no meaning. Now, he's 4. My heart aches every day thinking that, as he grows, he might forget me. From what I've heard, some of my relatives still see him, posting pictures, sharing moments. James and my son are living with my in-laws, so everyone seems to have access to him, except me. And that is a pain I can't describe. I hold on to the memories of us, clinging to the belief that at least he's with James, at least he's taken care of. I couldn't offer him much. I'm just starting over, barely scraping by at a startup with a paycheck that barely covers the basics. Sure, I get alimony every month, but it doesn't touch the lifestyle I once had. How do you maintain the life you're used to when everything changes? I thought, maybe, if I could get my life together, I'd stand a chance in a custody battle down the road. But fate had another plan for me. A couple of weeks ago, after months of silence, my parents reached out. They asked for my help. It was a twist I didn't see coming. They needed me to bail them out, because, as it turns out, James wasn't the man they thought he was. My brother sent me an email urging me to come over. They had something huge to tell me, something they could no longer keep hidden. I ignored the email at first, but the thought of it gnawed at me. Could this be the thing I needed? The thing that might bring me closer to my son? I went over that evening. And what I found was not what I expected. I had imagined them living in luxury, basking in the riches James promised them for betraying me. But the reality was different. They were struggling, living in worse conditions than before. Still, when my son saw me, it was like a beam of light in the darkness. That was the only part of the night that made everything bearable. My family begged for forgiveness the moment I walked in. They admitted their mistakes, said they couldn't take it back, but still asked for my forgiveness. After the divorce, when they approached James and my in-laws about the money they were promised, they found out it was all a lie. James denied ever making those promises. It was only insinuated that they'd be compensated well if they testified against me, but there was no proof. My family had been kept in the dark, threatened into silence, told that if they ever spoke out, they'd never see my son again. So, they kept quiet. And as it turns out, they weren't even getting the payoff they'd been promised. But that wasn't the worst part. James had turned them into free babysitters. Every single day, he'd drop our son off at my parents' house, expecting them to watch him without any support. My parents were struggling. My dad and brother had jobs, and my mom was overwhelmed. She couldn't handle all the work, plus looking after my son. But for the sake of keeping their access to him, they sacrificed everything. That's when they reached out to me. They wanted a deal. If I gave them the money James had promised them, they would testify for me this time. They'd fight for my custody. It was no surprise, really. My family had always been materialistic. And now, with my dad's business failure, they needed money more than ever. But there was more to it than that. They planned to concoct a story, claiming they were coerced into lying, pressured to testify against me. The thought of it made me sick. But what they didn't know was that I didn't need them anymore. I had been recording everything they said the moment I walked in. I had it all on tape. So I told them to send me any screenshots they had, proof of their manipulation, and I promised I'd help them. But I knew deep down I no longer needed to depend on them. I had already seen my son. I had the proof, the evidence to fight for custody again. And that's exactly what I did the very next day. I filed with my lawyer, armed with everything I needed. This time, I was ready. The battle is far from over, but I will win this. I'll prove that everything James accused me of was a lie. And I will show that my family, despite their betrayal, was never truly on his side. The tension has been building, and finally, the recording is playing in my favor. The very evidence they hoped to avoid has turned the tide, leaving James and his lawyer scrambling for any shred of defense. And as they struggle, I can't help but savor the moment, because this is exactly what they put me through in the past. Now, it's my turn. Karma, at its finest. They may be in a panic, but I'm relishing every second of it. The only part that stings a little is their bold accusation against me. They claim I've done the same thing James did, used them, recorded them without their consent, and turned it against them. But here's the thing, in my state, it's totally legal. It's admissible in court. So when they brought up the idea that I betrayed their trust, I just didn't get it. Betrayed their trust? They betrayed mine first. They took my ex-husband's side in the custody battle, and now they expect me to feel guilty for recording their words? They say it was out of necessity, that they needed the money. Well, I didn't need to screw them over to make my case. I didn't need to risk their perjury by making deals behind their backs when they'd already agreed to testify for me. But according to them, I didn't have the right to act. They've been texting me nonstop, trying to get me to change my mind, and it's becoming harder and harder to ignore them. They want to know, am I in the wrong for going behind my family's back, risking their involvement in this perjury case? It's like they want me to feel guilty for wanting justice. Fast forward to now, the custody battle is still dragging on. James and his lawyer are desperate to prove they've been honest, but with the threat of felony charges looming over their heads, it's clear they're in trouble. And as for me, I'm not concerned. I can't figure out why I was even worried about my parents in the first place. They never worried about me when it was my turn to be in the spotlight. The comments from people, strangers, even opened my eyes to the entitlement they'd shown. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but I've finally come to terms with it. I'm cutting ties. If they can sell me out for money, then why should I show any loyalty to them? They can go wherever they please. I'm not letting them hold me back anymore. Then came the news I'd been waiting for. I finally got custody of my son. The relief, the joy, the sense of victory, it's hard to put into words. I don't think I've ever been happier. And the icing on the cake? My in-laws, James, and my own parents were all charged with perjury. The possibility of jail time hangs over them like a dark cloud, and they're regretting everything now. But honestly, I don't care. I got what I wanted. I've got my son back, and nothing else matters. Of course, James is still fighting, trying to avoid jail, but I don't think he stands a chance. I filed a restraining order against everyone involved because I've been receiving threatening messages. The only people who would want to harm me are them, no one else. So I'm taking steps to protect myself. Life has been chaotic these past few weeks, but I'm learning to slow down. My son needs me, and I'm not going to let anything stand in the way of spending time with him. I'm cutting back on my work hours, and I've even thought about selling the house. A smaller apartment means I can save money, focus more on what truly matters. Rebuilding my relationship with my son won't be easy. He's happy to be with me, but he still asks about his dad and his grandparents. It breaks my heart every time. He tells me about how he lived with his grandparents for most of his life, only seeing his dad and my in-laws for part of the day. When I ask him about life with them, he makes a face and says it wasn't great. Constant fighting, tension in the air, it's clear they never wanted to take responsibility for him. And I don't understand it. How could anyone treat a child like that? It's beyond me. But now, he's with me. Safe, loved, and free from that toxic environment. Fast forward again, and here I am, 5 years later. It feels surreal, like the life I'm living now is someone else's story. So much has changed. My son is older now, and our bond has never been stronger. After countless therapy sessions, we're finally the family we should have been from the start. He's growing up into an amazing young man, and I know he'll be nothing like his father. He's 9 now, and already a gentleman in every sense of the word. I'm doing this on my own, and I have full custody. James gave up. He moved to Europe after his jail sentence, and honestly, I can't say I'm surprised. He went off with the woman he'd been cheating on me with, and now they're married. It's horrifying, but that's the kind of person he is, replacing his son with someone else's. As for my parents and brother, they're out of jail after serving 6 months for good behavior. They haven't reached out, and I haven't tried to contact them either. I'm grateful for that silence. There's nothing left to say. And my in-laws? I haven't heard from them in years. I don't need to. Life is moving forward for me and my son, and that's all I could have asked for. I've got a stable job, a steady income, and I'm working at a company I started 8 years ago. Things are looking up. I'm grateful, truly grateful, for the life we have now.